Welcome to Africa Insight. In this week's video, Louw unpacks the G20 Leaders Summit, which is happening this weekend in Johannesburg. So Louw, give us an update on what's going on.
So Jevin, it's obviously a shame that South Africa's G20 presidency has been overshadowed by the Trump administration's efforts to undermine the country. And it's been frustrating to see how the narrative's been focused on Trump's will he, won't he attendance of the Leaders Summit for most of the year. It reminds me of last year's BRICS Summit, you'll recall, which was overshadowed by speculation about Vladimir Putin's attendance. But it is worth pointing out that this weekend's events are a culmination of an entire year's worth of engagements. Yes, the optics are crucial, but these 2 days will not define South Africa's G20 presidency, at least not in my mind. I think of it more as a matric farewell dance in SA or a prom night in the US. Yes, it's a big deal, and you want the pictures to be good, but it doesn't define your last year at school, and it doesn't determine if you graduate or not. There have simply been too many multilateral engagements this year to pretend that it's all about Sunday. I'd say perhaps the best illustration of why I'd argue this is today's trilateral meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and representatives from the EU, South Africa's biggest investor, biggest trade partner, and main source of tourists. And these same officials, people like the European Council's Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa, will go straight from Johannesburg to Luanda on Monday to co-chair the AU-EU summit. In some ways, US attacks on South Africa has really prompted the EU to double down on its support for the country and its role within the G20, and combine this with South Africa's close relationship with China, Brazil, and India, its BRICS partners, and its healthy relationship with other key members. Recall, German, that Ramaphosa had a sit-down with Canada's Mark Carney at the ASEAN Summit in Malaysia last month, and the country's G20 membership and standing is not really under threat. That might change next year under a US presidency, but South Africa is not allowing the baseless attacks from Washington to dim the lights.
That's interesting, Louw. So the non-attendees include US Deputy President J.D. Vance, Argentina's Javier Milei, the likes of Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Russia's Vladimir Putin. What do we make of all of this?
Okay, so perhaps two comments on the non-attendees. J.D. Vance was set to attend in Trump's stead, but then cancelled his ticket on his boss's instructions. But Vance was always going to find the G20 a tough assignment, and Trump was always going to be unhappy about his deputy enjoying a moment in the spotlight, potentially looking presidential and rubbing shoulders with global heavy hitters. And so the US boycott has plenty to do with US domestic politics, and maybe also the gathering storm clouds around the Epstein matter. Now, Argentina's Milei has listened to his master's voice, announcing his non-attendance, but his country is still sending a delegation, and so too Mexico, whose President Sheinbaum isn't coming, and China, whose President Xi Jinping isn't making the trip. But as you reminded me this week, Jevin, Xi does not do a lot of traveling outside Asia, and often deputizes Premier Li Jiang to represent his country on the world stage. And of course, Sergei Lavrov almost always represents Russia, as Putin rarely leaves his country. So the narrative that people are skipping the Leaders Summit is not really true. In the end, South Africa has maintained its dignity and put in a good shift as G20 president. And even though not everyone liked the country's theme of solidarity, equality, and sustainability, engagements throughout the year have laid down a solid foundation for future cooperation, especially with South Africa's historical partners.
Thanks, Louw. I think let's leave it at that. Thank you for joining Africa Insight this week. If you'd like more information on our products or services, please visit our website or socials.
Thank you for joining Africa Insight this week. If you'd like more information on our products or services, please visit our website or socials.